My name is Marina Mayer, Editor-in-Chief of Food Logistics and Supply and Demand Chain Executive, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar, How Honeywell Voice Solutions Elevate Your Workforce, where Sam Gonzalez, Vice President of Enterprise Architecture for DecisionPoint, and G.W. Hall, Senior Channel Business Manager at Honeywell, will explore how Honeywell Voice Automated Solutions drive operational excellence. Just a reminder to our audience to submit your questions via the Q&A console at any time throughout the presentation. And don't forget to check out our downloadable assets on the main portal page, including links to our awards nominations, more information about our upcoming Women in Supply Chain Forum, and a link to DecisionPoint's most recent white paper in collaboration with Honeywell. And so with that, gentlemen, welcome to the program. So happy to have you.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you, Marina.
Yes, thank you, Marina, for having us.
So let's get started. Let's talk about the basics. What is voice automation and voice-guided workflows in the context of warehouse and distribution?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting because it's one of these technologies. It's been around for a very long time, and it has a pretty high adoption rate, but there are still people in the market that aren't familiar with the technology. So, the idea is it's a departure from the typical way of interacting with your systems and your technology, where traditionally you're looking at a screen, you're typing things in and just doing basic scanning type activities. And now you're changing the dynamic, and you're taking that workflow and you're putting it into a headset. So now, instead of looking at the instructions or interpreting what I'm supposed to be doing next, the system is telling me, go here, pick these items, move this, scan this. And you're following these voice instructions. And then the way that you feed back into the system is by simply speaking. So it really gives people a much more natural and intuitive way to interact with technology. And it also drives a lot of different efficiencies along with it, because you're able to start coupling interacting with the system with physical movements. Whereas with traditional technologies, you have to stop generally. If you're looking at a screen, you're typing, you're interacting. You can't do that while you're on the move and still do that safely. So if you go out into any facility and you see people interacting with technology, you will often see their feet stop moving. All action, all product movement stops as they're interacting with the technology. Completely different when you start to implement voice, because now your eyes are free, your hands are free, you're able to listen as you're walking, you're able to interact with the system as you're moving products. So all that wasted movement starts to go away.
Yeah, Sam, and I think one of the big things, you hit on it there when you go eyes free, head up, eyes free, it gives that worker the ability to, consciously look at where they're going, to continue their pick. What we start to see is increases in productivity and also accuracy, because they're focused on what they're doing next. So when you take it away from the scan gun and you put it up onto the headset and you're verbally communicating back and forth, you start to see those efficiencies right away at the beginning. And it also helps with the training time, which we'll talk about later.
So then why should companies care? I mean, with all the other technologies out there that they can choose from, why should they care about the voice automation and voice guided workflow technology?
Yeah, I think go ahead. I'll go ahead and chime in first. I think it's a really, really good question, because I think something that you hit on there is that technology gets noisy. There is a lot of options out there. And especially as technology is moving quicker and we start seeing interesting things like robotics and drones, and there's a lot of flashy things out there. AI is obviously a big topic. And so it can be a little bit overwhelming to say, hey, what technology should I be implementing here? Should I be spending my time and my budget dollars on? And I would say when it comes to voice, I think the strongest reason is this is a tried and true technology with very proven returns on productivity, accuracy, safety, and others. And because of that, because it's a mature technology, because it's a proven technology, it's one of those that you can feel very secure that if you implement it, you're going to be able to see these same returns. You're going to be able to do it quickly, efficiently, and you're going to get these returns.
And, completely agree with those statements. We've been around for 35 plus years. The technology continues to get better, even in the voice picking and the speech recognition. When you put this into a warehouse, after the operational walkthrough and we start pulling this together, the ROIs prove out very well. We'll discuss those in this talk track as well. But the productivity gains that you see quickly inside your warehouse that help drive those, drive those numbers that we're going to discuss later, that's from day one. So you're up and running. You're not building this out. You're gaining that productivity when you implement.
Yeah. And, actually one other thing that comes to mind that I would even add to this is if you look at technology as a whole, people are starting to get more comfortable. It's becoming more common to interact with their technology through their voice. It used to be that when this was being implemented in warehouses and distribution centers, people may not be interacting with technology in their daily life through their voice, but now they are. People are used to talking to Siri. They're used to talking to digital assistants. Now with AI, you can do voice-based chat sessions with AI. And so I think as far as a user interface, it's becoming more ingrained in our everyday life to interact with technology in this way.
So then what kinds of business outcomes do these specific technologies aim to deliver? I mean, we're talking efficiency, accuracy, safety. Kind of walk us through what these deliverables are.
Sure. So when we get inside those deliverables, obviously we start to talk about what does a productivity gain look like. We see anywhere from a 10 to 35% increase in productivity. The impressive part of that is we see that on the first day of picking. So when you start looking at that, right away out of the gate, we're seeing those productivity. So when you start looking at a warehouse, most of the time you are down, your metricing, all of your productivity. So if you start adding 10 to 35%, you'll see huge gains right away. Also with that, the reduction of errors. On average, we see roughly a 50% reduction in errors inside of a warehouse. So if you start factoring in, bill backs, the auditing process, as you look at your auditors and, how often are you breaking down a pallet that was picked because of an error that was found inside here? If you start reducing that, you're receiving that productivity across the board. Employee turnover and employee training. If I can put this headset on a person and send them out and have them picking on day one, we're not learning what our buttons are, what they need to be. They're following those instructions that are being given to them. We have the ability to, if they didn't hear something, if you say again, it'll repeat that information. So as those pickers are moving through their system, they have that flexibility to be able to listen, to follow those instructions. Safety incidents, anywhere from a 5 to 20% reduction in safety, because, Sam said it earlier, in the past, that person has to stop their process, type their information in, they're looking down. In this system, your hands are free, your eyes are up, and you're able to move through your facility seamlessly as you go from pick to pick. So, a lot of efficiencies come in right away from the very beginning here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly what we see when we're implementing this technology. It's rare that when you're going in to do some process improvement that you're able to get both productivity and accuracy gains. Sometimes those two metrics can be a little bit at odds, right? You can gain a lot of accuracy if you're willing to add a bunch of double checks to everything, but then that's going to kill your productivity. You can really increase your productivity if you stop caring so much about accuracy. With just traditional process improvement, it tends to be a give and take. But by bringing in voice technology, it's completely changing the dynamic because it is giving you more focus, clearer instructions, and the ability to do simultaneous actions. Again, that idea of your feet don't have to stop moving to interact with the technology. So being able to blend those two, because anybody who's ever sat down with the customer and asked them this question, what's most important to you, productivity or accuracy? The answer is always going to be both. Nobody wants to sacrifice on one to get the other. So being able to implement a technology that gets you both really is a really good prospect and makes our customers very happy.
And for those of you who joined in a little bit late, just a reminder to submit your questions via the Q&A console at any time throughout the presentation. So just find those there, and obviously some of the downloadable links that are there for you. Okay, so let's keep going. So how does the voice system work? Kind of walk us through what this looks like.
Sure. So when you get into a voice solution, we are going to tie into your WMS. There's multiple ways of doing that, and with your picking in your replenishment processes. Multiple ways of doing it. One of the things that we want to make sure we point out, there are purpose-built devices We call that a Talkman. If you've heard the terminology, is it the blue potato or the black potato? Because it's a device that does not have a screen, that is worn or vehicle mounted, and then a headset. So, we are talking back and forth to give you the ability to, select your pick, to go out, to move forward. One of the newer, releases of the software, we are completely device agnostic. So if you're currently using, an Android device, if you're using an iOS device, we are able to interface with those and use those as the host. Or once again, we still do have our purpose-built device. One of the things that comes into play is the headset. When you're using one of the headsets, they're going to have your noise canceling, they're going to have your speech recognition. You actually train your headset. One of the things that we have to be very, careful with is you want to train your headset where you're going to be using it. You don't want to train it in an office and then you go out on your production floor with noise and everything else. So when you're out training a headset, you train it in the area you're going to use it, so you get that speech recognition that is super important when you're out doing that. But once again, we are device agnostic and have the ability for purpose-built devices. So we're very flexible when it comes to that when you're working these systems.
Yeah. And I think, just kind of sharing from my own personal experience, it's one of those things that until you try it yourself, you don't realize how good it can be. Meaning the combination of that high quality noise canceling headset along with the engine that's so good at picking up. I've had instances where, you go out to some facilities, you're standing next to some of these big conveyor systems, and it's so loud that I literally can't hear myself saying the words that I'm saying, but the system is still picking up those commands. So it really is, purpose built for these kind of really tough environments, industrial environments, and does a really, really good job. The other thing I'd like to add, and I think this question was more geared towards the technology, but I think it's also a good opportunity to highlight how partners like DecisionPoint play into this. And so as being a voice integration partner, what we like to do, because there, as GW pointed out, there's a lot of options on the technology, the devices you use, best practices. So generally, we like to take a very, very consultative approach with our customers. So we have voice and business process experts on our staff. And what we'll do with our customers is we'll go through and we'll do a very, very detailed walkthrough of the process that you're looking to voice automate. We'll map out exactly how you're doing that process today, and we're going to map out all of the areas where we can improve that process by implementing voice. Where do we take out waste, not just in physical movement, but it's a good opportunity to take a look at the process in general. Are there some steps that maybe don't need to be done? Can we streamline some things? Can we automate some things as we start to build out this flow? So not only are you getting the better user interface, but you're also getting an opportunity to optimize the overall business process. And then we can propose that back to the customer. That allows us to get a really good idea on what the ROI is going to be, the amount of time savings, and really help you understand and justify within your own organization implementing this new technology and be able to quantify what it's going to get you.
No, and I love that. And I appreciate the other side of it, because I think, when it comes to the technologies, people are always like, well, how does it work? But then when you go to the customer, it operates completely different because it's from a customer's vantage point. So I do appreciate that back end part of it. So let's talk about examples. Like, what examples can you provide of real life deployments, and even provide some information on their measured benefits? If there's any productivity gains or cost savings that you can offer.
Sure. So when we start looking into that, it's the increase in productivity. One of the things that Sam said is we come out to your facility. This is a partnership between Honeywell and DPT, where we come out, either their team or ours, and we work with you. So we're going to look at everything from the processes that you're currently doing, and how we implement this in a manner that's going to show you that ROI. A typical ROI after we do that walkthrough and we build this out, and we'll use your numbers, your picks per hour, picks per minute. We take that information when we're building this out, we agree upon that this is real life data, and show you an ROI. A typical ROI for voice is right around 12 months. So, we've seen them as short as 4 months, and we've seen them, some of them drag out longer than that, into the 18 months. But we're going to agree upon the data that goes in there. So if we can show you a 12-month ROI, an increase in productivity up to 35%, the reduction of picking errors. So when you start to pull all that information together, that's where we're going to drive home the value when it comes to this voice solution. You heard Sam say earlier, when you ask someone what's more important, productivity or accuracy, that answer is always both. I've never heard it to be anything else other than that. So we're giving you an increase in both of those areas, and that's what we, drive forward.
Yeah, and I would also say too, I mean, those do tend to be the main focus, and that's a big driver for really most technology spends, is that you want to get your productivity, your accuracy. That's a big focus. But there's a lot of additional side benefits that come along with the technology that, although it may not be the reason that the customer started looking for something, they really start to appreciate as they implement. And some of those benefits are shorter training times. When you're able to just have very clear verbal instructions, step by step, kind of like instead of following a map, having the GPS just tell you to turn left, turn right, or go straight, it really simplifies these complex use cases. And for a lot of our customers, they might have high turnover rate. So that means, the quicker they can get people trained and productive, it makes a huge impact. But also we have a lot of customers that have seasonal employees. They may ramp up during their busy time, and they can sometimes double their staff. And so when you have people that are only coming on for a few months out of the year, you can't afford for them to take 3 weeks to become fully productive. So by enabling them with the right technology, they're able to get out and be productive much, much quicker. Generally speaking, we see people being productive within, their first day, getting up to the same numbers as the average user.
So Sam, let's kind of stay on that a little bit. What factors drive the ROI, and what kind of assumptions can be critical to keep in mind?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the assumptions are, as we mentioned, based around productivity and accuracy. That's generally where we're getting the ROI. And really, and I'm going to oversimplify this, and I just want to call out that this is an oversimplification because there's a lot of work that goes into this on the back end. But we can take a look at what it takes you today. What is the level of effort? What are your picks per hour? How much time? Document the different steps and figure out exactly where you're spending that time. And by figuring out which pieces of that we can remove, anytime you stop moving your feet, anytime you have to look at the device, any steps that we can automate, we can start to get a pretty clear picture of how many seconds per transaction we're going to be able to save you. And then we can use that to calculate out the ROI. You can also make an argument for, hey, if I'm able to reduce your training time from 3 weeks down to a couple of days, what kind of impact? And that can be calculated as well. But again, that tends to be kind of a tangential benefit to the platform. And then the one that's hard to quantify, but still really important for people to understand, is safety. Right? There's a huge impact to safety. Again, as GW called out, your eyes up, your hands free, which means you're aware of what's going on in your environment and you're not being distracted. That one can be harder to quantify, but it is a really important one to keep in mind as well.
Sure. And, to drive this one, to continue this conversation, what do we look for in a warehouse? So we typically look for, a warehouse that has 20 or more pickers, full-time pickers, for, in the case, full shift pickers. We're looking for, where we see that high productivity gain is picking a case or each quantity. So a less than a pallet pick. You've heard us say this, but workers spending a lot of time looking at screens, starting and stopping, the physical movement. Those are the things that we're looking for inside of a warehouse to really drive this efficiency. It's full-time pickers and pickers that are picking in each quantity or or picking a case quantity.
Yeah, I think that is an important call out. It's rare that we see a situation where a voice can't help, but there are occasions. For example, I remember we consulted with a furniture manufacturer that was moving really, really large items, and they were doing maybe 3 picks per hour just because of the sheer size of the products that they were picking. And so it's hard to get to an ROI when your pick volume is very, very low, because saving 5, 10 or 15 seconds per transaction when you're doing 3 an hour is not a huge impact. So we definitely want to make sure that we're finding the right use cases, and high volume scenarios definitely help multiply that ROI.
So GW, let's go to talking about integrating the voice solution before we switch to questions from the audience, which for those of you who came in a little bit late, I know some of you are still coming in, get your questions in via the Q&A console at any time throughout so we can address it at the end. But how do you integrate the voice solution with existing, WMS systems, ERPs, even some of these legacy systems, and then walk us through what kind of challenges or limitations companies can anticipate.
Sure. So, on the backside of this, we have a pro services team is run out of our Pittsburgh office, which is going to work and come in and work with you to take your information, put it, define that. And there's also input from the customer on that as well. Like, are there exceptions? How do you handle shortages? Where do you handle those in the equation? So our pro services team will come in, work with the customer, work with the WMS to make sure we're communicating back correctly. But the biggest part of that is any exceptions that you have. We know how with these WMSs, they get very customized as you've worked with them throughout the years. So that's where the team comes in, and we'll define that, work with the end user and build it out so you're getting that solution that first off is repeatable and is able to build out and show that productivity gain. So we're gonna, bring our team in, work together and define that and deliver that solution. Once again, the solution can be adjusted. We see that in a lot of our customer base. We start off with just the picking. As we get picking and get that integrated, then we want to go into replenishment. Anytime you come up to an exception, how do you want to handle that? Some places will, just skip to the end and then go back and then come back to that area, or short pick. So there's a lot of customization that goes into this, and we work with you on every step of the process to make sure we're delivering that in a manner that best suits the business. So a lot of that custom side will come in there and through the pro services team that is available.
And I would just encourage any customer, don't think that because you have, maybe an older system or you think your system might not work, most likely it's going to work just fine. But that's where we can get in and we can consult and we can take a look at what you have and start to customize something specifically for what your needs are in your system. I mean, I've seen implementations on systems that were implemented, 30 years ago, and the guy who built the transactions isn't there anymore. I mean, it happens. So don't let that be a barrier to reaching out and seeing if it's a good fit for you.
So let's go to questions from the audience. We have a couple coming through. So one of them is, what are the key differentiators of Honeywell's voice solution compared to alternatives that are out there?
So one of the, some of the key differences is the ability to, the different languages that we support. We're supporting up over 45 different languages in a template training. So when you look at, when I say template training, that's where your worker will actually go in and train on their dialect, on their speech. We also have the ability to do what we call a pick up and go, which is 25 different languages, 25 plus languages supported there, where think of that a lot like your Siri, where you just start talking and it recognizes your dialect. So we have a lot of flexibility inside of that. We've been around for, 35 plus years. We've got many different solutions. We're device agnostic when it comes down to the fact that we're supporting Android purpose built. So a lot of flexibility in our solution. So hopefully I answered that question.
No, I appreciate it. Sam, did you have anything to add? I don't want to cut you off trying to.
Yeah, no, I think GW covered that perfectly. I think the one thing I might add is not even just comparing to other voice solutions, but just to other solutions that might help you to streamline your operations. I think some of the differentiators is that voice, again, it's been proven, it can be implemented quickly, and the ROIs are very, very known. And so it's really a great technology, and then also it's really easy for you to get started and to figure out how it's going to impact your business versus some of the other technologies out there that may seem interesting but are a little bit more risky. We can put it that way. I'm thinking of maybe a few drone operations I've seen that didn't go so well, or we won't get into that. But voice is very stable. It's a good solution. It's proven. And I think the other thing you're going to find from Honeywell is that even though it's been around for 35 years, they continue to innovate and push and grow the technology. So it's getting better and better every year.
And then another question from the audience is, are there constraints that are more challenging, meaning languages, accents, dialects, when you talk about the voice in general, what kind of constraints are there that could be a little bit challenging, or are there any?
So that's, we talked about, just mentioned that we have two different ways, the template training versus the pick up and go. When we, if you do have a heavy dialect that drives forward from Pittsburgh, so if anybody wants to laugh at my dialect when it comes to downtown or anything along those lines, that's where we use our template training. So the system will recognize your specific dialect. For example, if you say, if you're in a particular area that you says they're 8 slightly different than other areas, by training that template, it recognizes your voice and how you speak. So that's how we overcome those areas where, if you have that driving factor in that arena, pick up and go might not work as well for you. That's where we use our template training. Once again, we support 45, 48 plus languages. So and then with the template training, we're going to drill down in those languages to give you the best possible performance you can have.
Yeah. And, I would think this isn't a technology challenge, more of an operational challenge. And this is one thing I really like to make sure that our customers understand. And that is, we really need the help of management to make sure that they're enforcing the move to a new technology. And this is true of any new technology adoption. I think one challenge you can find with implementing something new is that if people are given the option to do what they've always done, and you say, hey, here's a new technology, use it if you want, people are always going to default to what they've been doing and they're comfortable with. So you really need help getting people past that kind of initial hurdle of something new. Now, the vast majority of users, after they've been using the voice system for just a very short amount of time, they love it, right? They see, oh, it's easier, but it's human nature to always default. If everybody always had the choice, every organization will still run off of pen and paper. People don't like the change. So it's really, really important to set the right expectations with the customer and the management, and that, we're saying, okay, we're going this route. We're taking away this older technology. We're going to be going with voice, and make sure that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction on that.
And then another question, do you work with Zebra devices?
We do. We work on all Android platforms. So we can support that without a problem. We'll also work on iOS as well. So yes, we are device agnostic.
And then how do they know if the Honeywell Voice can bring or deliver the business outcome for their workflow? And how do you continue that conversation? How can you ensure that it meets what they're looking to achieve?
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit, but I'm happy to elaborate on it, is that's where we as the partner can come in and really help. Is we can sit down with you, we can talk through the value, and then we can actually spend the time and look at your operation specifically. GW threw out some really great numbers, and those are very common, but if you want to know specifically, hey, are you going to be closer to that 15% productivity improvement or closer to that 35% productivity improvement? The only way we're really going to get there is to go through your operations, see how you're doing it today, build a proposed workflow, and work together on that. And we can absolutely do that with you. So I would say if that's something you're interested in, please reach out. We're happy to do that consultation. And like I said, the great thing about it is before implementing any of the technology, we can give you a very, very clear picture of what kind of impact this is going to have for your business.
Agreed. And to drive that point further, both Sam's team and the team that we have at Honeywell, we have solution business consultants that are coming in. They're warehouse, they're warehouse specialists. They're going through, they're looking at not just how you're picking, is there potentially better ways to do it? Their resources that come in and help build this out. We agree upon all the numbers in the ROI calculator. So, it's not, making statements that are inaccurate. It's, do we agree upon these are the picks per hour? This is how we're going to do this. And we present that data back to you so you can make a decision. So we are here to support.
Wonderful. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Sam and GW, for all of your insight and guidance and expertise. And thank you, too, for our wonderful audience for being a part of our program today. An archived version of today's presentation will be posted at sdcexec.com, or you can access the on-demand version from the registration link, the link that you used to log into today's webinar. Again, my name is Marina Mayer, Editor-in-Chief of Food Logistics and Supply and Demand Chain Executive, and I hope to see you again at our next webinar.
Thank you.